This is the 6th and final week of our teaching series on cliches. We've been looking at cliches that Christians often use, but what we've wanted to do is replace these cliches with something that's more helpful. And so if you've missed any of the sermons in this series, you can go back to our website, you can go to Facebook and find them all there. But I want to just recap what cliches we've done, and then give you what we've maybe think would be more helpful. But the things that are more helpful usually don't fit on a bumper sticker. So bear with me, but I think they are actually more helpful. So week 1, instead of telling people everything happens for a reason, you could try, we don't always know why things happen, but we know that God is with us and God is for us. From week 2, instead of saying, God won't give you more than you can handle, you could try saying, God helps us handle what we've got. Because we know a lot of people who get way more than they can handle. Then week 3, instead of saying, God must have needed another angel in heaven, the thing you could try is just supportive silence. Just be there for someone who is hurting and grieving. Then in week 4, instead of saying the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it, we could all try to start conversations about God and faith rather than try to stop them before they get started. And then last week, instead of saying God helps those who help themselves, we can say God helps those who cannot help themselves. And God actually calls us to help others when we are strong enough to help others who can't help themselves. So this week, our final cliche is what the whole series, where we get the title for the series, it's love the sinner, hate the sin. And so you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with these words. We should love sinners. But that's only if we realize that we ourselves are also sinners, that everyone is a sinner. No one is a better or worse sinner. And we should hate sin, because sin is anything that separates us from God. Part of our human condition is that we are sinful. No one is sinless. And within our sinful condition, faithful Christian people disagree on what things qualify as sins or not. And that's okay for us to debate these things and for us to seek where God is leading us. But the thing that I have an issue with about this cliche, love the sinner, hate the sin, is what's the motivation behind saying it? Does it actually help anyone when we say this cliche? Now, I've heard it used in a few different ways, and maybe you've heard it used differently, but the 2 ways that I've heard it are this. One way is to be kind of indifferent towards someone. Like, well, I don't live that way and I don't agree with it, but not my business, doesn't matter to me, doesn't impact me, so hey, love the sinner, hate the sin. The other way I've heard this used is to be judgmental of other people, to kind of show how maybe someone else is a way worse sinner than you are. So it's like, well, I don't condone that type of lifestyle. I don't condone that behavior. I'm way better than doing that. I would never do that. But love the sinner, hate the sin. So the first way I've heard it lets people be distant and indifferent to each other. And the second way is for people to be distant and judgmental of each other. And if that's the way we're using this cliche, then I don't think it actually helps anyone. So I want us to look at how Jesus actually loves some sinners that are around him in our reading that we have today. So we have this scene where Jesus is teaching all these people, and some scribes and Pharisees come in and kind of interrupt his teaching session. And the scribes and Pharisees were the religious leaders of his day who did not like Jesus because he threatened their power. And so they're testing him as they're coming to him, and they bring this poor woman to come and stand before him and everyone else that he's teaching. And they point out how she has been caught in the very act of committing adultery. But my question is, if she was caught in the very act of fooling around, where is the guy? Okay, there had to be somebody else with her. Are they protecting him? Is he a friend of theirs? Why are they just bringing her in front of Jesus? So they ask him, well, Jesus, in our law, it says, we're commanded to stone such women. And even the way they talk about it, such women, they're trying to make it seem like, oh, she's a way worse sinner than these righteous people could ever be, and they would never be as terrible as her. So they're trying to distance themselves from her. And then they're trying to test Jesus. Now, what do you say? And they're trying to get Jesus caught in a double bind. Because if he says, sure, let's stone her right now, well, then he and they would have all been in trouble with the Roman authorities, because only the Roman officials could do that type of punishment. And then if he said to them, no, let's not stone her, then they would have said, oh, you're overlooking this one part of the law of Moses from Leviticus and Deuteronomy. But Jesus knew the law as well as the scribes and Pharisees. He knew it better than the scribes and Pharisees. And he knew that these scribes and Pharisees were overlooking major parts of the law. First, in the law, when there were crimes, they also did have a due process of sorts. They would have some sort of trial and witnesses to try people of certain kinds of sins. And also, in the crime of adultery, more weight rested on the men who, in this case, because adultery was defined as one man stealing another man's property, since women were considered property at that time. So there's all sorts of things Jesus could have debated with them about the law, but he didn't do any of that. He just did this strange thing where it says he wrote with his finger on the ground. He's writing something. We don't know what he was writing. People have been wondering forever, for centuries, what was Jesus writing? And the best thing that I've heard speculated about is that he was writing all of the sins of those people who were accusing the woman and showing he knows what they've done. But they keep pestering him, and they keep pestering him, and he says, okay, let anyone among you who's without sin, then you be the first to throw a stone at her. And the other common way we've heard that said is, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. So when he says that, all of these so-called righteous men realize that Jesus has seen through their false motivations. Jesus knows what they're really getting at. And it says that they leave one by one. And this woman is left standing in front of Jesus. She must have been so humiliated. What an uncomfortable situation for her. And instead of condemning her, he sends her away with encouragement to begin again. He turns her humiliation into a fresh start. Now, he doesn't dismiss sin, but he is motivated by love in how he treats her. And we see that the scribes and Pharisees weren't motivated by love. They were motivated by their own selfish ambition, by pride, by using someone who had no value to them to try to trap Jesus to get him. So their motivations were revealed, and Jesus' motivation of love was also shown. If you ask me, the scribes and the Pharisees had a pretty poor mission strategy of how to bring people to Jesus. Is shaming someone really the best way to motivate them to live differently? Is this really how to love the sinner and hate the sin? I don't think so. Instead of making people agree with your beliefs or making them behave in a certain way before inviting them into our church community, I think we should welcome people where they are at. We should welcome them with that radical kind of love that Jesus showed, where he wasn't afraid to cross boundaries to love someone. I think that faith in God always grows from a sense of belonging and a sense of trust that is built up first. I don't think faith in God grows from being forced to act a certain way or being shamed into acting a certain way or to signing on to a certain set of beliefs. I think some churches do evangelize by making people believe exactly like them and behave exactly like them before anyone is allowed to even join the group. I think sometimes churches say, once you clean up your act, then you'll be acceptable to God, then you can be a part of our group. But I think when we start from the place of love, start from welcoming people and let them know that they belong, that God welcomes them, I think that's the place where they can start to truly grow in their faith and trust of God. And then God can work on their heart the way God needs to, not the way we think we should tell them to. Now, there's a writer named Rachel Held Evans, and she wrote a blog post a few years ago that just went viral about why millions of people in her generation, ages 18 to 30, were leaving the church. This generation is the least connected to any religious communities that we have in the U.S. 18 to 30-year-olds are just the very least connected. But millions of people responded to her blog post about the reasons why young people are leaving church, and a number of the reasons that she shares for leaving the church highlight the ways that churches often use the tactics of the scribes and the Pharisees in their mission strategy rather than the tactics of Jesus, who led with radical love. So some of her reasons include, and I think I've got a picture of her, and in this picture she says, one of her quotes is, "We millennials have been advertised to our entire lives, and we can tell when someone is just trying to sell us something. I think church is the last place I want to go to be sold another product." So that kind of relates to some of her reasons, but these are a few of the reasons for why she left the church. She said, "I left the church because when we talked about sin, that usually just meant sex. I left the church because I didn't want to be anyone's project. I left the church because when I asked tough questions about troubling things I found in the Bible, people kept telling me cliches like God's ways are higher than ours." And she said she never actually gave up on Jesus. She wanted to be in a place where she could learn more about God, where she could serve others, where she could make a difference in this world. And she eventually then did join a church community, and she wrote another blog post about why she came back to church, and she eventually turned that into a book called Searching for Sunday, and I have a picture of her book there. But here are some of the reasons why she came back to church. Her first reason was Jesus. Her second reason was grace. She also said the fact that when somebody gets sick or dies or has a baby or loses their job, it's the church ladies who are the first to show up with a hot dish and a hug. And that is important ministry. And then she said, like it or not, I need community, and real community isn't about surrounding myself with people just like me. And then her final reason was her parents. She said, my parents, who though we don't always agree theologically, have modeled Christian compassion and grace. And it was through their example that she was able to see the love of Jesus. I'm so thankful that she started this conversation. She didn't start it, but she really articulated it in a good way. Like where churches have missed the boat in reaching out to people, and to help us really keep on our mission of really showing Jesus' love in powerful ways so that we can change the world together, rather than just be stuck on following a certain set of rules. My hope is that we don't rely on cliches that don't build up Christian community. I think we should just do the hard work of loving people, especially people that are really hard for us to love. And I think we all need to realize that we are all sinners, and that all sinners are worthy of respect, of dignity, and of love. I think sometimes Christians can get caught up in playing church rather than being the church and doing awesome things in Jesus' name. The community that Jesus created when he died on the cross and rose from the dead is a community that has room for all sinners to receive grace and forgiveness. It's a place where the quality of our relationships allows all of us to see where Jesus is showing up in our lives and offering all of us the fresh start that we need. Amen.